Get out! Get out right now! You think I'm stupid? I know what you're doing here! Christina Hayes shoved her face inches from Damon Wells, screaming so loud that spit flew from her mouth. She jabbed her finger repeatedly into his chest, each poke harder than the last. Don't you dare touch anything else! I've called security and I'm calling the police next. You people think you can just walk in here and cast the joint? She grabbed the handbag from his hands and clutched it to her chest like he'd been stealing it. Her voice reached a shrieking pitch that made children in the store start crying. Everyone looks! This is what a thief looks like! Take pictures so you remember his face! The entire boutique had gone dead silent except for the sound of phones recording. Customers backed away from the screaming manager as if witnessing a complete mental breakdown. What Christina didn't know would end her world in 12 minutes. Have you ever seen pure evil in action? Karma is brutal. To understand what just happened, you need to know about Meridian Luxury Boutique. This isn't just another high-end store. This is the crown jewel of the Meridian Retail Group empire, their flagship location in downtown Seattle's most exclusive shopping district. Earlier that morning, Christina Hayes had strutted through the store like she owned the place, her heels clicking against marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people's cars. Remember, ladies, she announced to her staff during the morning briefing, we maintain the highest standards here. We cater to a very specific clientele, and it's our job to keep out the riffraff. Sarah Kim, a 24-year-old sales associate, shifted uncomfortably as Christina continued her speech. This was the third time this month Christina had used that exact phrase. Sarah knew exactly what riffraff meant in Christina's vocabulary. Just 2 weeks earlier, Christina had been bragging to her friends at their weekly wine night about how she ran the most exclusive store in Seattle. I have a sixth sense about people, she boasted, swirling her Chardonnay. I can spot trouble the moment it walks through my door. You have to be firm with certain types or they'll think they belong somewhere they don't. Now at 2:47 p.m. on what had started as a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, a matte black Bentley Mulsanne pulled into the VIP parking spot directly in front of the boutique. The car's price tag, $400,000, represented more money than Christina made in 8 years. Damon Wells stepped out, adjusting his custom Italian suit jacket. His briefcase was handcrafted leather with subtle gold accents, the kind of understated luxury that only people with serious money would recognize. In his jacket pocket, barely visible, was the edge of a platinum American Express Centurion card, the invitation-only black card that required spending over $10 million annually just to qualify. Inside the boutique, the atmosphere was exactly what you'd expect from a store where handbags started at $15,000. White customers browsed leisurely, attended by personal shoppers who brought them champagne and offered private viewing rooms for expensive pieces. Mrs. Eleanor Davidson, a 72-year-old federal judge, was examining a diamond bracelet while her personal shopper detailed its provenance. The moment Damon walked through the door, Christina's entire demeanor changed. She touched her earpiece and spoke in a low, urgent voice. Code yellow. All stations code yellow. Sarah Kim's stomach dropped. She'd heard that code before. It meant Christina had identified what she considered a security risk, which in Christina's world meant any black customer who looked like they might actually be able to afford something. Damon moved through the store with the quiet confidence of someone completely comfortable in luxury environments. He approached a display of limited edition Hermes Birkin bags, examining a $75,000 piece with the kind of expertise that suggested deep familiarity with high-end craftsmanship. His fingers traced the stitching pattern with professional precision, checking details that only someone in the luxury retail business would know to look for. Christina whispered venomously to Jennifer, another sales associate, "Watch him like a hawk. These people always try something. I've seen it 100 times." Sarah Kim felt sick. She'd been working retail for 6 years and she'd never once seen a customer try something. But she'd seen Christina's Code Yellow protocol in action before, and it always targeted the same type of customer. Damon continued his careful examination of the merchandise, moving to the watch display that housed the store's most expensive item, a $120,000 Richard Mille timepiece. He studied it with the kind of focused attention that revealed genuine knowledge about luxury watches. Mrs. Davidson had noticed the commotion and quietly activated her iPad's recording function. As a federal judge, she'd presided over enough discrimination cases to recognize the warning signs of what was about to unfold. Christina positioned herself directly in Damon's path as he moved toward the jewelry counter. Her body language was aggressive, territorial. She'd made her decision about this customer the moment he walked in, and nothing, not his perfectly tailored clothing, not his obviously expensive accessories, not his respectful demeanor, was going to change her mind. The other customers in the store began to sense the tension. Conversations quieted, people started looking up from their shopping, and then Christina opened her mouth and changed the course of her life forever. What happened next would be replayed on national television and studied in corporate boardrooms across America. The entire store went silent except for the sound of Christina's labored breathing as she stood inches from Damon's face, her finger still pressed against his chest from where she'd been jabbing him. "Ma'am," Damon said with remarkable calm, straightening his jacket where she'd wrinkled it. "I'm simply shopping for my wife's 20th anniversary gift. I'd appreciate it if you'd remove your hands from me." Christina let out a bitter laugh that echoed off the marble walls. "Right. And I'm supposed to believe that? You think I was born yesterday?" The handful of customers in the store had all stopped what they were doing. Phones emerged from purses and pockets as people began recording what was clearly spiraling into something much bigger than a customer service dispute. "Ma'am, I'd like to speak with your manager," Damon said, his voice remaining steady despite the public humiliation he was enduring. Christina's eyes flashed with triumph. "I am the manager, buddy. This is my store, and I'm telling you to get out before I call the police." She turned to address the watching customers, speaking about Damon as if he weren't standing right there. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse this disruption. Some people think they can just walk into establishments like this and help themselves to whatever they want." Mrs. Davidson, the federal judge, stepped forward with her iPad still recording. "Young lady, your behavior is absolutely disgraceful. This gentleman has done nothing wrong." Christina whipped around to face the elderly woman. "Ma'am, please don't interfere with store security procedures. I'm trained to identify suspicious behavior, and this individual was clearly casing our jewelry section." "What jewelry was I chasing?" Damon asked quietly. "I was looking at handbags and watches, all of which are openly displayed for customers to examine." "Don't get smart with me." Christina's voice rose another octave. "I saw you taking pictures." "I haven't taken any pictures, ma'am. My phone hasn't left my pocket." Sarah Kim approached hesitantly, her conscience finally overriding her fear of losing her job. "Christina, perhaps we could—" "Sarah, step back right now!" Christina snapped. "This man is a potential shoplifter, and you need to maintain your distance." The word shoplifter hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several customers audibly gasped. A young black woman who had just entered the store, Tiffany Washington, immediately pulled out her phone and began live streaming on TikTok. "Y'all, I just walked into this bougie store, and this woman is literally calling this well-dressed black man a shoplifter for shopping," Tiffany whispered into her phone. "This is about to go viral." Within 30 seconds, her viewer count jumped from 0 to 847 people. Damon reached calmly into his jacket pocket. "Ma'am, I'm happy to show you my identification, credit cards, and references if that would help resolve this situation." "Don't reach for anything!" Christina screamed so loudly that a small child in the store started crying. "Hands where I can see them! Everyone, he's reaching for something! I'm reaching for my wallet, ma'am! I don't care what you say you're reaching for! Security! Security!" Miguel Torres, the store's security guard, came rushing from the back office, immediately confused by the chaos he'd walked into. Miguel was a 45-year-old veteran who'd been working security for 8 years and had never encountered a situation quite like this. "Ma'am, what's the situation?" Miguel asked, looking between Christina's flushed face and Damon's calm demeanor. "Remove this individual immediately," Christina demanded. "He was acting suspicious around the jewelry and became aggressive when I questioned him." Miguel looked at Damon, who was standing perfectly still with his hands visible. He looked at the customers, all of whom appeared more upset with Christina than with the man she was accusing. He looked at the phones recording everything. "Sir," Miguel said to Damon, "can you tell me what happened here?" I was examining merchandise for my wife's anniversary gift when this woman began shouting accusations at me, Damon replied. I've offered to show identification and I've remained respectful throughout this encounter. Miguel nodded slowly. In his 8 years of security work, he'd learned to read situations quickly. This didn't feel like a shoplifting incident. This felt like something else entirely. Ma'am, Miguel said carefully to Christina, what specific behavior did you observe that concerned you? Christina's face grew even redder. He was examining expensive items for too long, and he looked like he didn't belong here. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Several customers began murmuring angrily. Tiffany's TikTok viewer count had jumped to over 2,000, with comments flooding in faster than she could read them. Ma'am, Miguel said slowly, examining merchandise isn't against store policy, and looking like someone doesn't belong, that's not a security issue. Are you questioning my judgment? Christina's voice reached a dangerous pitch. Because I can have you replaced just as easily as I can have him removed. Mrs. Davidson stepped forward again, her federal judge authority evident in her bearing. Young lady, I'm Federal Judge Eleanor Davidson, and I'm witnessing what appears to be textbook racial discrimination. I'm advising you to stop this immediately. Christina's world began tilting on its axis. A federal judge, recording everything, but she was too far down this path to turn back now. I don't care what you are, she shot back. This is my store, and I make the decisions about who shops here. Damon pulled out his phone with deliberate calm. I'm going to make a phone call. No! Christina lunged forward as if to grab his phone. No recordings, no calls. Miguel, arrest him for trespassing. Miguel looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Ma'am, I can't arrest someone for making a phone call, and I'm not a police officer. I can't arrest anyone. Then call the police. Tell them we have an aggressive black male refusing to leave the premises. The racial element of her statement was so explicit that several customers gasped out loud. Tiffany's live stream comments exploded with outrage. Damon's call connected. James, it's Damon. I need you at the flagship store immediately. We have a situation. Christina's ears perked up at the name James. Oh, calling your lawyer? She sneered. Good luck with that. I've got cameras, witnesses, and security on my side. What Christina didn't realize was that every single camera was capturing her behavior. Every witness was disgusted by her actions, and her own security guard was refusing to follow her orders. Sir, Miguel said to Damon, I apologize for this situation. You haven't violated any store policies, and I won't be removing you from the premises. Christina's face went pale. Miguel, I'm ordering you to remove him or you're fired. Ma'am, I won't lose my job over this, but I also won't remove a paying customer who's done nothing wrong. The store had now been completely divided into two camps. Christina standing alone in her fury, and everyone else, customers, staff, security, watching her meltdown with a mixture of horror and fascination. Tiffany's live stream had reached 5,000 viewers, with #Meridian racism beginning to trend on social media. Mrs. Davidson had captured everything on her iPad, creating a legal record that would soon become crucial evidence. And somewhere across the city, a phone was ringing in an executive office, about to trigger a response that would change everything. The question that hung in the air wasn't whether Christina would face consequences for her behavior. The question was whether she had any idea how powerful the man she was destroying her career over actually was. She was about to find out. Miguel Torres looked Christina Hayes directly in the eyes and said the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Ma'am, I will not remove a customer from shopping while black. The entire boutique went dead silent. Even Tiffany stopped whispering commentary into her live stream. Miguel's words carried the weight of 8 years in security, military service, and a lifetime of witnessing injustice. Christina's face transformed from red to purple. That's it. You're fired. Clean out your locker and get out of my store. The explosion of anger from customers was immediate and deafening. Are you insane? Shouted an elderly woman clutching her Chanel purse. I'm never shopping here again, declared another customer, storming toward the exit. This is disgusting, yelled a middle-aged man, already pulling up the store's corporate number on his phone. Sarah Kim had been watching this catastrophe unfold for 10 minutes, and something inside her finally snapped. She stepped directly between Christina and Damon. "Christina, stop this right now. This is wrong, and you know it." Christina wheeled around to face her employee. "Excuse me? Did you just—" "Yes, I did." Sarah's voice shook with righteous anger. "This gentleman has been nothing but polite, and you've been treating him like a criminal since the moment he walked in." "That's it!" Christina screamed. "You're fired too. Does anyone else want to lose their job defending him?" The store erupted into complete chaos. Customers began streaming toward the exits in disgust. Mrs. Davidson approached other shoppers, quietly exchanging contact information. "We need witnesses," she whispered. "This cannot stand." Jennifer Moss, the other sales associate, stood frozen behind the counter, torn between her mortgage payments and her conscience. She watched customer after customer walk out, many of them loudly declaring they would never return. Tiffany's TikTok livestream viewer count had exploded to over 8,000 people, with comments flooding in faster than the screen could display them. "OMG, this is insane! Someone needs to find out who this racist woman is. This poor man just wanted to shop. Meridian racism needs to trend." Christina, now completely isolated except for the trembling Jennifer, retreated to her office and frantically dialed her district manager. "Janet, it's Christina at the flagship store. I have an emergency situation. I've got an aggressive customer who's been threatening staff and refusing to leave. He's brought in accomplices, and they're filming everything, probably planning some kind of scam. I need corporate support immediately." While Christina spun her web of lies in the back office, Damon's phone conversation continued in the main store area. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it that made nearby customers stop and listen. "James, I need you here now. Full crisis protocol. Board notification will be required, and bring the legal team." Those words, board notification and legal team, sent ripples through the remaining customers. Who was this man? What kind of customer had their own legal team on speed dial? Miguel Torres approached Damon with a heavy heart. "Sir, I want to apologize for what you've experienced here today. I've been in security for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this." "Thank you, Miguel. Your integrity in this situation won't be forgotten." Sarah Kim, now officially unemployed, walked over with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I want you to know that not everyone here thinks like her. It's Wells, Damon Wells, and Sarah, your courage today speaks volumes about your character." Outside, the first news van was pulling up to the curb. A producer from King 5 News had been monitoring social media trends when Meridian racism started exploding across multiple platforms. What had started as a single TikTok live stream was now being shared across Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Inside the store, the remaining customers were pulling up the corporate headquarters number, flooding the phone lines with complaints. The corporate social media accounts were being bombarded with videos and angry comments. Christina emerged from her office to find her store nearly empty. The few remaining customers were either recording everything or speaking in hushed, angry tones about what they'd witnessed. "Everyone needs to calm down," she announced to the mostly empty store. "This situation has been resolved. We can return to normal shopping." But nothing about this situation was normal, and nothing was resolved. Jennifer Moss finally found her voice. "Christina, I think you should apologize. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." "Apologize?" Christina's laugh sounded unhinged. "For protecting our store? For maintaining our standards? I will not apologize for doing my job." Through the large front windows, more news vans were arriving. Social media was erupting. The corporate phone lines were melting down. 2 good employees had lost their jobs for standing up to racism. And in the center of it all, Damon Wells continued his quiet phone conversation. "James, the situation has escalated beyond what we discussed. You need to see this for yourself. And James, bring Richardson." The name Richardson sent a chill through the few remaining staff members. Everyone in retail knew that name. But surely he didn't mean... Outside, a black Mercedes S-Class was speeding through downtown Seattle traffic, its occupant frantically taking calls and trying to understand how their company's flagship store had become ground zero for a viral discrimination scandal. Christina Hayes had no idea that her world was about to end. At exactly 3:34 p.m., a convoy of 3 black vehicles pulled up to the front of Meridian Luxury Boutique like a presidential motorcade. The lead car was a Bentley Bentayga, followed by a Mercedes S-Class, and a third vehicle that customers couldn't identify but clearly screamed executive authority. James Richardson burst out of the Mercedes before it had fully stopped, his face a mask of panic and barely controlled rage. Behind him emerged a small army, corporate lawyers, PR specialists, and what appeared to be a crisis management team. The few remaining customers in the store pressed against the windows to see what was happening. Tiffany's TikTok live stream, now approaching 12,000 viewers, captured everything as she whispered urgently into her phone. "Y'all, I don't know what's about to happen, but some serious corporate people just pulled up like the president is coming." Richardson strode through the boutique's entrance with the bearing of a man accustomed to command, scanning the store until his eyes found Damon. When they locked eyes, Richardson's expression shifted to something approaching devastation. "Mr. Wells, sir," Richardson said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent store. "I am profoundly, deeply sorry for what has happened here today." The formal deference in his voice made several customers exchange confused glances. This wasn't how you spoke to a customer. This was how you spoke to someone far above your pay grade. Christina emerged from behind the jewelry counter, her face showing a flicker of confusion. She recognized Richardson. Every Meridian employee knew the CEO's face. But his presence here made no sense. And why was he calling this man Mr. Wells with such obvious respect? "James," Damon replied calmly, "thank you for coming so quickly. I think we have some serious issues to address." Richardson's team had spread throughout the store, some speaking quietly into phones, others beginning to examine the security equipment. A woman with a legal pad was already approaching Mrs. Davidson, the federal judge. "Mr. Wells," Richardson continued, his voice now carrying the weight of corporate authority, "I want everyone here to understand exactly what has transpired today." He turned to address the stunned customers, his voice rising to fill the boutique. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am James Richardson, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Retail Group. I want to introduce you to Mr. Damon Wells, the founder and majority owner of our entire company." The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming. Christina's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and then pure, absolute terror. Tiffany's TikTok live stream exploded. The viewer count jumped to 15,000 in 30 seconds as viewers frantically shared the stream. Comments were flying by so fast they were unreadable. "That's right," Richardson continued, his voice now carrying an edge of barely controlled fury. "The gentleman who was just accused of theft, publicly humiliated and threatened with arrest is the man who built this company from a single store 18 years ago. He is the owner of all 127 Meridian locations nationwide." Mrs. Davidson lowered her iPad and spoke into stunned silence. "Sweet Mother of God," Miguel Torres, who had been fired 15 minutes earlier for refusing to remove a paying customer, felt his knees go weak. He had been defending his ultimate boss without knowing it. Sarah Kim, who had also been fired for standing up to racism, covered her mouth with both hands as the magnitude of what had just occurred hit her. Christina Hayes stood frozen like a deer in headlights, her brain unable to process the complete destruction of her reality. "Mr. Wells founded Meridian Retail Group in 2006. Richardson continued relentlessly. "He grew it from a single boutique into a nearly $3 billion empire. He is personally worth over $2.8 billion, and today, in his own flagship store, he was treated like a criminal." The corporate lawyers were now moving through the store with practiced efficiency. The PR team was already fielding calls from news organizations that had gotten wind of the viral TikTok stream. Damon stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that made everyone in the store lean in to listen. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize to each of you for what you witnessed here today. This is not the Meridian standard. This is not who we are as a company." He turned to look directly at Christina, who appeared to be having some kind of breakdown. "Miss Hayes, you stated that you own this store and that you would decide who shops here. You publicly accused me of theft, had me physically assaulted by pointing and jabbing, and attempted to have me arrested. You did this because of my race." His voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer blow. You fired 2 employees for refusing to participate in your discrimination. You lied to the corporation about the nature of this incident, and you did all of this while representing my company to my customers in my store. Christina tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. The legal team had approached several customers, including Mrs. Davidson, gathering preliminary witness statements. The PR team was already drafting crisis response plans. The entire store had become a crime scene of corporate misconduct. Tiffany's live stream had reached 20,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly. The hashtag #MeridianRacism was now trending nationally on Twitter. Local news crews were arriving outside, setting up cameras for what was clearly going to be a major story. Richardson's phone was buzzing constantly with calls from board members, media outlets, and corporate executives across the retail industry. This wasn't just a store-level incident anymore. This was a national scandal. "Mr. Wells," Richardson said, his voice heavy with corporate authority, "what are your instructions?" Those 4 words carried the weight of absolute power. Every person in the store understood that whatever Damon said next would happen, immediately and without question. Christina finally found her voice, a strangled whisper that barely carried across the store. "Mr. Wells, sir, I didn't know. I was just following protocol." Damon's response was swift and devastating. "What protocol, Miss Hayes? The protocol that assumes black customers are criminals? The protocol that allows you to physically assault shoppers? The protocol that lets you fire employees for refusing to participate in racism?" His voice rose slightly, carrying the authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing. "Because I wrote the actual protocols for this company. Every single policy, every training manual, every standard you claim to be following. And nowhere in any of those documents does it say to treat customers like criminals based on their race." The corporate lawyers exchanged glances. This was going to be a very long day. Richardson stepped forward. "Mr. Wells, should we move this conversation to the office?" Damon nodded. "Yes. Miss Hayes, you're coming with us. It's time for a very serious conversation about the future of your employment." As they moved toward the back office, Christina's legs barely carried her. She had spent the last hour destroying the career of the most powerful person she would ever meet. And now, it was time to face the consequences. The back office of Meridian's flagship store had transformed into a corporate war room within minutes. James Richardson commandeered the manager's desk, his laptop open with multiple video conferences running simultaneously. Corporate lawyers flanked him on both sides, legal pads already filling with notes. A crisis management specialist worked frantically on her phone, coordinating media responses. Damon Wells stood with his arms crossed near the window, his calm demeanor masking the controlled fury of a billionaire who had just been publicly humiliated in his own store. His custom suit remained perfectly pressed, despite the physical assault he'd endured. But his eyes carried the cold fire of a man prepared to dismantle someone's life with surgical precision. Christina Hayes sat in a chair facing this corporate tribunal, her hands shaking so violently she had to clasp them together to keep them still. Her earlier arrogance had evaporated completely, replaced by the growing horror of someone who was beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. "Christina," Richardson began, his voice carrying the gravitas of corporate authority honed over decades of executive decisions, "I want you to explain your actions to Mr. Wells. Every decision you made, every word you spoke, every protocol you claim to have followed. Think very carefully, because your answers will determine whether this remains an internal matter or becomes a federal discrimination case." Christina's voice emerged as barely a whisper, cracking under the pressure. "Sir, I thought he looked suspicious. I was protecting the store's merchandise and following our standard security procedures for potential theft situations." Damon's response was surgical in its precision, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. "Miss Hayes, what specific observable behavior did you witness that led you to conclude I was contemplating theft?" He was examining expensive items for an extended period, and he appeared to be someone who... Christina's voice trailed off as she realized the trap she was walking into. "Complete that sentence, Miss Hayes." Damon's voice carried the arctic coldness of a CEO about to destroy an incompetent subordinate. I appeared to be someone who what, exactly? Christina's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Every possible completion of that sentence would be an admission of racial profiling that could be used against her in court. Richardson pulled up the store's comprehensive security system on his laptop, the screen displaying multiple camera angles with time-stamp precision. Perhaps we should review the actual footage of what transpired, shall we? The high-definition security footage began at 2:43 p.m., showing Damon's entrance in crystal-clear detail. The video documented him walking calmly through the store, examining the handbag display with the careful attention of someone making a significant purchase decision. I observe a well-dressed customer examining merchandise, Richardson narrated with prosecutorial precision. Touching nothing inappropriately, taking no photographs, maintaining respectful distance from other customers, behaving exactly like every other valued customer we serve daily. The footage continued chronologically, showing Damon's movement to the watch display. Again, his behavior was completely professional, the methodical examination of someone considering a six-figure purchase. Miss Hayes, Richardson continued relentlessly, can you identify any specific moment in this footage where Mr. Wells behaved in a manner inconsistent with normal customer behavior? Christina stared at the screen, her face losing color as she watched herself systematically destroy her own career. The camera angle doesn't capture everything. There were subtle indicators. Subtle indicators? Richardson's voice sharpened. Please elaborate on these subtle indicators that justified a public accusation of theft. Richardson's laptop chimed with an incoming priority video call. That's our executive HR director, Patricia Stone, joining us from corporate headquarters with Christina's complete employment file. Patricia's face appeared on screen, her expression grim. Her first words sent a chill through the room that made even the lawyers look uncomfortable. James, I've conducted a comprehensive review of Christina Hayes' employment record. We have a catastrophic liability situation. She began reading from her computer with the methodical precision of someone documenting a federal case. May 15, 2023. Formal customer complaint filed against Christina Hayes for systematically following a black customer throughout the store and making aggressive inquiries about their shopping intentions. June 3, 2023. Written disciplinary action issued for inappropriate comments about customer demographics during a staff training meeting, specifically referring to keeping certain types of people from thinking they belong here. The silence in the room was so complete that the air conditioning system sounded like a hurricane. Patricia continued her devastating recitation. September 12, 2023. Second formal customer complaint filed by an affluent black couple who reported that Christina refused to unlock jewelry cases for them while immediately accommodating white customers with similar requests. November 8, 2023. Final written warning issued after a black customer complained that Christina advised them they might find more suitable options at stores that cater to their demographic. Christina's face had drained of all color, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. February 14, 2024. Customer complaint filed by a Latino family reporting that Christina questioned their financial qualifications for items they were attempting to purchase and suggested they consider less expensive alternatives. April 22, 2024. Internal investigation launched after multiple staff reports of Christina implementing unauthorized customer monitoring protocols that appeared to target minority shoppers. A knock on the office door interrupted the systematic destruction of Christina's defense. Richardson called for entry, and Miguel Torres walked in alongside Sarah Kim and Mrs. Eleanor Davidson, the federal judge who had witnessed the entire incident. Mr. Wells, Miguel said, his voice steady despite having been wrongfully terminated an hour earlier. I need to provide my complete witness testimony about what I've observed working under Miss Hayes. Richardson gestured for them to take seats. Please proceed with your full account. Miguel's testimony was devastating in its comprehensiveness. I've worked retail security for 8 years across 17 different locations. I've never encountered a manager who implemented systematic discrimination like Christina Hayes. She has a formal protocol she calls Code Yellow that she activates exclusively when black customers enter the store. Code Yellow? Patricia's voice sharpened from the laptop speakers. Sarah Kim leaned forward, her voice growing stronger as she found her courage. She conducted specific training sessions for staff about this system. She never explicitly mentioned race, but the Code Yellow alert was only ever used for black customers. She trained us to maintain visual contact, monitor shopping patterns, and assess purchase probability for customers who, in her words, don't match our target demographic profile. Mrs. Davidson's federal judicial authority filled the room as she spoke. As someone who has presided over discrimination cases for 30 years, I can state unequivocally that what I witnessed today represents textbook racial profiling, followed by assault, public humiliation, and attempted false imprisonment. The behavior was so egregious that I immediately began creating a legal record of the incident. Richardson's phone buzzed with continuous updates from the crisis management team monitoring social media and news coverage. He glanced at the latest message, his expression growing increasingly grave. The hashtag #MeridianRacism is now trending #1 nationally on Twitter and TikTok combined. We've reached over 5 million social media impressions in the past 90 minutes. Our company's stock price has dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Customer service lines at all 127 locations are completely overwhelmed with complaint calls. Patricia's voice cut through the laptop speakers with corporate urgency. James, our legal department has completed their preliminary assessment. We're facing massive federal discrimination lawsuit exposure, not just from today's incident, but from the documented pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning nearly 2 years. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has already made informal inquiries. Christina finally found her voice, desperation making it stronger but less coherent. Mr. Wells, sir, please. I have 2 young children who depend on me. I need this job. I realize I made serious errors in judgment, but I can change. I can attend sensitivity training. I can do better if you give me another chance. Damon's response was delivered with the quiet finality of a man accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Miss Hayes, you didn't make errors in judgment. You implemented a systematic campaign of racial discrimination over nearly 2 years. You publicly humiliated me, physically assaulted me with repeated contact, and then lied to corporate management about the nature of the incident. You terminated 2 employees for refusing to participate in your discriminatory practices. Richardson consulted his phone for another update, his face reflecting the magnitude of the crisis. We now have 63 former customers coming forward on social media platforms with detailed accounts of similar discriminatory treatment at this location. The local FBI Civil Rights Task Force has opened a preliminary inquiry. The full scope of the institutional failure was crystallizing. This wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment. This was evidence of systematic civil rights violations that had been allowed to continue for months. One of the corporate lawyers leaned forward to address Christina directly. Miss Hayes, we need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes and that you have the right to legal representation. However, your continued employment with Meridian Retail Group is no longer under discussion. Christina, Richardson said, his voice carrying the finality of corporate judgment delivered by someone with absolute authority. You are hereby terminated immediately for cause. The specific violations include systematic violation of federal anti-discrimination laws, assault of a customer, falsification of incident reports to corporate management, wrongful termination of employees, and bringing substantial legal and financial liability to the company. Christina's composure collapsed entirely. She began sobbing uncontrollably, her hands covering her face as the reality of her situation hit her. Please, sir, please, I'm so sorry. I made terrible mistakes. I'll do anything to make this right. Your apology is acknowledged, Damon replied with the cold professionalism of a billionaire who had built his empire through decisive action. But the damage you've caused is irreversible. Your actions today have cost our company millions of dollars in stock value, traumatized multiple customers, violated federal law, and betrayed everything this organization was founded to represent. Corporate security officers appeared at the office door. Not Miguel, who had been wrongfully terminated, but executives from headquarters security. Christina was escorted from the building where she had terrorized minority customers for 18 months, her retail career permanently destroyed. The moment she was gone, the atmosphere in the room shifted from confrontation to reconstruction. "Miguel," Damon said, his voice warming for the first time since the crisis began, "you are not only immediately reinstated with full back pay, but I'm promoting you to Regional Security Director with a base salary of $85,000 and equity participation in the company. Your moral courage today exemplifies everything we demand from our leadership." Miguel's eyes filled with tears as 18 months of watching discrimination finally resulted in justice. "Sir, thank you. I just did what I knew was right." "Sarah," Richardson continued with obvious satisfaction, "you are hereby promoted to store manager of this flagship location with a base salary of $70,000, representing a $40,000 increase from your previous position. Your willingness to sacrifice your job to fight racism demonstrates the leadership qualities we need throughout our organization." Sarah began crying openly, overwhelmed by the rapid transformation from unemployment to management in less than 2 hours. Mrs. Davidson spoke with the authority of 3 decades on the federal bench. "Mr. Wells, I want you to know that I'll be filing formal commendations with both the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice about your company's response to this crisis. This is how institutional discrimination should be addressed." The systemic changes were already being implemented at corporate speed. Within 12 hours of the incident, Meridian Retail Group's emergency board meeting was called to order in the corporate headquarters executive conference room. Damon Wells sat at the head of the mahogany table, no longer the humiliated customer from yesterday, but fully transformed back into the billionaire CEO who commanded a retail empire. The 12 board members had flown in from across the country, their faces reflecting the gravity of a crisis that had wiped out nearly $400 million in market value overnight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon began, his voice carrying the authority that had built a $3 billion company, "we are here to address the most serious breach of our corporate values in the history of this organization." The presentation screen lit up with devastating statistics. #Meridian Racism had generated over 15 million social media impressions. The original TikTok video had been viewed 8 million times. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News had all led their morning coverage with the story. The company's stock had plummeted 18% before trading was temporarily halted. "Christina Hayes has been terminated for cause," Richardson reported to the board. "Legal has confirmed that her systematic discrimination violated both company policy and federal civil rights law." The board voted unanimously to implement the most comprehensive anti-discrimination reforms in retail industry history. Every single one of Meridian's 127 stores would close immediately for 48 hours of mandatory bias elimination training. Any manager found implementing discriminatory practices would face immediate termination without severance. But Christina's personal consequences were just beginning. By noon that day, her name, photo, and the security footage of her racist tirade had spread across every major social media platform. Her LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments calling her a disgrace. Her personal Facebook and Instagram accounts were bombarded with thousands of angry messages. Her husband filed for divorce that afternoon, citing irreconcilable differences and public humiliation. Her mortgage company began foreclosure proceedings when her termination became public and her employment prospects evaporated. The private school her children attended suggested she might want to consider other educational options for the following year. Christina Hayes had become the poster child for workplace racism, and her life was systematically falling apart as a direct result of her own actions. Meanwhile, the positive transformations were equally dramatic. Sarah Kim's promotion to store manager made her the youngest black woman to lead a flagship Meridian location. Within her first week, she implemented customer service protocols that resulted in the highest satisfaction scores in company history. Her diverse hiring practices brought in staff who spoke 6 different languages, immediately expanding the store's customer base. Miguel Torres's promotion to Regional Security Director came with a mandate to eliminate discriminatory security practices across all West Coast locations. His dignity-first security protocols became the new industry standard, eventually adopted by over 300 retail companies nationwide. Mrs. Davidson's federal judicial commendation resulted in congressional hearings on retail discrimination. Her testimony led to the Retail Equity Act, federal legislation requiring bias training and anonymous reporting systems for all major retail chains. The legal consequences for Christina personally were swift and severe. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund filed a federal civil rights lawsuit naming her personally, along with Meridian Retail Group. While the company settled for $2.8 million, Christina was found personally liable for $150,000 in punitive damages. She declared bankruptcy within 6 months. The industry-wide impact was unprecedented. Within 30 days, over 50 major retail chains had implemented Meridian standard anti-discrimination protocols. Harvard Business School added the case to their required curriculum. The incident became the gold standard for how corporate leadership should respond to systematic racism. Damon Wells appeared on 60 Minutes 3 weeks later, discussing how power and privilege should be used to protect the vulnerable rather than perpetuate injustice. The question isn't whether discrimination exists in corporate America, he told Leslie Stahl. The question is whether people with power will use that power to stop it or enable it. The stock market's response was extraordinary. After the initial panic selling, institutional investors recognized that Meridian had demonstrated exceptional crisis leadership. The stock not only recovered its losses, but surged 23% higher than its pre-incident price. Most remarkably, customer loyalty actually increased. The company's decisive action against racism resulted in new customers who had previously avoided shopping there, believing it catered only to wealthy white clientele. Christina Hayes, meanwhile, was working part-time at a grocery store in a different state, having been blacklisted from retail management positions industry-wide. Her children had to change schools 3 times due to harassment. Her former colleagues refused to provide references. The woman who had spent 18 months systematically humiliating black customers for not belonging now found herself permanently excluded from the industry she had once dominated. Justice, it turned out, could be as systematic as discrimination, but far more permanent. The question that remained was whether these changes would last beyond the news cycle, or whether they represented a genuine transformation in how America's retail industry treated its customers. The answer would come in the months that followed, as other companies faced their own moments of reckoning and had to choose between enabling racism or eliminating it. 1 year later, Damon Wells walked through the same doors of Meridian Luxury Boutique where Christina Hayes had accused him of theft. The transformation was extraordinary. Sarah Kim, now the flagship store manager, greeted him with a genuine smile from behind the jewelry counter where she'd once watched discrimination unfold helplessly. Mr. Wells, our quarterly numbers just came in. We're serving customers from 43 countries with staff speaking 12 languages. Sales are up 67% from last year. The store buzzed with authentic inclusivity. A young black father selected a graduation watch while his daughter played nearby. An elderly Latina woman examined handbags with bilingual assistance. A hijabi mother and teenager browsed jewelry together, both clearly welcomed and comfortable. Miguel Torres had revolutionized security across all 127 Meridian locations. His dignity-first protocols were now adopted by over 800 retail companies nationwide. Our anonymous bias reporting system processed 2,400 reports this year, Miguel explained. We terminated 47 employees for discrimination and promoted 63 who stood up to racism. The Meridian model became a required curriculum at 200 universities worldwide. Mrs. Davidson's congressional testimony led to the Federal Retail Equity Act mandating bias training and accountability systems at major retail chains. The impact was staggering. Department of Justice statistics showed 89% reduction in retail discrimination complaints nationwide. Meridian Standard entered corporate vocabulary as the benchmark for decisive action against workplace bias. Christina Hayes' destruction became a cautionary tale in business ethics courses. Her systematic racism hadn't just cost her a job, it obliterated her entire life while sparking national conversation about discrimination consequences. Tiffany Washington parlayed her viral TikTok documentation into civil rights advocacy. Her accountability media organization now trains people to safely document discrimination. What happened here proved something crucial, Damon reflected, standing where Christina had jabbed his chest. Real change doesn't come from good intentions or diversity seminars. It happens when people with actual power decide to protect others instead of protecting exclusionary systems. Meridian achieved record profits while creating America's most inclusive retail environment. Competitors who dismissed these changes as woke publicity stunts scrambled to implement similar reforms as customers demanded accountability. The most powerful change was cultural. An entire generation of retail workers witnessed what happened when someone finally said enough to systematic racism and backed it up with decisive action. The message was clear. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was bad business. In America's capitalist system, that combination proved remarkably effective at driving lasting change. Christina Hayes now worked part-time at a discount retailer in another state, permanently blacklisted from retail management. Her children changed schools 3 times due to harassment. Her divorce was finalized. Her house was foreclosed. The woman who spent 18 months humiliating customers for not belonging found herself permanently excluded from the industry she once dominated. Justice, when delivered systematically, could be more devastating than the discrimination it punished. Have you experienced retail discrimination? What responsibility do business leaders have to create dignified customer experiences? How can consumers hold companies accountable for their values, not just products? If this story of accountability and transformation inspired you, like this video and subscribe for more stories about justice prevailing. Share this with someone who needs to see that courage can create lasting change. What stories of leadership defeating discrimination should we cover next?